So, welcome to the next episode of ALS Matters, podcast produced by the ALS Association. Today, we are here with E. Wilson, who recently tested positive for a familial version of ALS, C9, correct?
Correct.
So, I'm just going to have a quick chat about everything ALS. And if you wouldn't mind, like, share, subscribe, do all the things. And Lee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Lee, obviously. I live in Knoxville, currently in Tennessee. Married to my husband. We have a couple of dogs. And my introduction to ALS really started, I guess, back in 2000. But at that time, I was too young to know anything about it, essentially. And then I was thrust back into this world in 2024 when my dad was diagnosed. So, and that just so happened to be right when my husband and I were trying to start our family. So, as terrible as ALS is, I view my dad's time with it as a blessing because I feel like it allowed my husband and I to take a step back, me to get genetic testing and prevent us from having children that would also carry C9. So, I guess that's my introduction. It feels like just yesterday, but it feels like a million years at the same time. So it's been crazy.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you talk a little more about kind of going through the genetic testing process and kind of how that affected your guys' decision on children? I'm curious about it because my family, when me and my wife were talking about having children, my mother was like dead set against it. So.
Oh, no. So I feel like my approach to genetic testing was a little different than most people because we were in the middle of trying to start our family. We had actually just gone through 2 miscarriages back to back. So I was regularly going to my OBGYN. And when I suspected that my dad had ALS before he got his diagnosis, I decided I need to go get genetic testing before we proceed. So I actually reached out to my OB and asked if they could do genetic testing there. And she said, absolutely, we'll order it through LabCorp. Just come on in and get the blood test. So I did that. I had no counseling ahead of time, which I would highly suggest that everyone gets counseling before genetic testing, but I don't think that would have changed my mind either way because we needed to know before proceeding.
Right.
I had the blood test done on May 1st of 2024. My dad was diagnosed, I can't remember if it was May 20th or May 22nd when we went up to his neurologist, but he was diagnosed one of those days. And then he passed away actually on June 25th. And the day after that, so June 26th, I got the call with my results.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a wild time. But at the time, and I don't blame the OBGYN or their clinic, I don't think they're too well versed in genetic counseling. Obviously, they're OBs. But at the time, it was just a phone call. Hey, you carry this, but your odds are 50-50. I wouldn't worry about it, but we're going to go ahead and send you over to a genetic counselor. So when that happened, that was June 26th. I think I saw my genetic counselor August something. I don't remember the date. And when I walked in there with my results, she said, so she was asking questions about our family history, obviously, and have I read into this C9 ORF72? And of course I had a million times since then. But she was like, so yeah, your odds of having it are 99.99%. And I was like, what? I was just told a month ago it was 50%.
Right.
She went over it a million times in that hour that we were there. And she's very confident that my odds are 99.99%. But then I think I got into my neurologist in December. So a couple months later, I went to him and he was like, there's no way to tell. And I was like, okay, that's fair, So then I was just teetering back and forth between my neurologist and my genetic counselor. So they still kind of feel different ways. My genetic counselor believes that by studying my results, it's 99.99%. My neurologist thinks it's 50-50. So that's the fun side of all of this, you could say.
You've got a twisted version of fun.
Right.
What was, when you got your results, what was that conversation like with your husband?
It wasn't fun. I'm glad he was there with me in the genetic counseling appointment. I don't, as you can tell, I don't process things, I guess, normally. I am very much a dark humor type of person. I'm going to make the best of it. I can't change anything. So when we found out, I think I was more in shock, and it didn't really hit me. He was very upset, obviously. But since then, I've made plans for the future, essentially. So I'm very thankful for the genetic testing because of that. If I do end up being clinically diagnosed, I have already decided what I do want, what I don't want, as far as care, end of life, all of that.
Yeah.
So that's been a blessing, I guess you could say, as far as genetic counseling goes. I'm very thankful. And also it's really catapulted me into this world. Started sharing my story online, got connected with the ALS Association, and been doing great things from there. So it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, I saw one of your videos and someone had made the comment, if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about going through, planning of children and family and all that kind of stuff. And someone had made the comment, well, why would you think about having children with this that runs in your family? And that's always hit kind of close to me because we have a fairly extensive family history of it. And is one of the things we didn't talk a ton about when I was a kid. I mean, we all knew what it was, and it was kind of this black cloud that hung over you, but you really, until now with like the Calcati and things like that, it didn't really make a difference if you talked about it or not. It didn't seem like. So I'm glad to see that a lot more people are.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you said it was your grandmother that had it, correct?
Mm-hmm. My paternal grandmother.
They talk about it much when you were younger or young adulthood, that sort of thing?
No. So I was 5 when I don't know if she was diagnosed in 2000 or if she had just started showing symptoms in 2000. I was only 5. And she passed away in 2004. So I was 9.
Oh, gotcha.
I didn't know much about it then, obviously. And I do know that the doctors at that point told my family it's not genetic, so you guys don't really need to worry about it. So yeah, no, we never really thought about it after that until my dad started showing symptoms. And even when he first told me, I think I have ALS, I was like, you can't, like, it's your odds are, there's no way,
Right.
She had it, you can't have it. And we were wrong, obviously. So yeah.
What was it like for you as a young adult, being a caregiver for your dad?
In the moment, you don't think twice about it. He spent his life taking care of me. I would do it all over again,
Yeah.
But looking back, it was very stressful. It's a very vulnerable time. The person that you look up to and has always been so strong that's not them anymore. I mean, mentally he was there, but he also had terminal cancer as well. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his battle was short-lived, but it was very tough. And as a caregiver, like I said, I would do it all over again for him. But when I look back now, there's a lot of mental trauma that comes, especially after you're out of it and you can take a step back and look at it. But yeah, the doctor's appointments, the legalities of it all, I would do it in a heartbeat all over again if I could have him back and had to do it.
Yeah. Was there you're talking about a dark sense of humor. Is there an example of something that was funny in his progression through ALS that kind of stands out to you?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know if it's necessarily progression, but so we found out about his cancer first, technically. His ALS symptoms started first, but we didn't get that diagnosis until after we knew he had cancer. So he got the cancer diagnosis in March and then got his ALS diagnosis in May. And he would type out on his phone because he couldn't talk anymore. So he had a text to speech and he would say, "I'm such an overachiever." Like not just 1, but 2 terminal illnesses.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one that sticks out in my mind the most. At the moment, I was so angry at him for saying that because obviously, like, you're dying. What do you mean? This is not funny to me. But now I'm like, I'm glad he still had his humor
Yeah. It's one of the things I've noticed with a lot of the ALS patients I've talked with over the last year since I've tied up with the ALS Association, and there is definitely a very dark streak of humor that runs through the group.
You almost have to. I mean, your days are just filled with sadness and it's dark, and you got to laugh or else your days are going to be just even more miserable than they are.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of led you, or we already talked about that, never mind, leading up to genetic counseling, and how did, once you found out about that, what changed for you outside of like, talking to folks about ALS and things like that? What are some things that you've changed in your personal life since you've found out?
I take care of myself more. That's a huge thing. So that's a positive, I guess. I really am mindful about what I put into my body now. I try to get out and do some sort of physical activity. There are days where I'm just lazy and don't want to, but I definitely take a lot better care of myself, at least physically. So that's changed. And I guess another part that's changed for me is, so I stay at home. I'm a stay-at-home wife. Our goal is for me to be a stay-at-home mother eventually. But so I have a lot of free time. And instead of just rotting on the couch, now I spend my time trying to advocate for ALS. So that's been a big change in my life. This, and I've enrolled in clinical trials. I'm aware that clinical trials probably aren't going to help me, but I'm hopeful that we will get there and there will be a point where this is curable and there's not just a fatality for every single person who's diagnosed with this. So that's my goal. Even if it's not going to help me, hopefully I can be a part of finding a cure eventually.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you say that. So I have an 8-year-old daughter. And when we go in for the Qalsody treatments, she almost every time now she's like, "Oh, boring daddy's going to be here this weekend. I wish boring daddy would go on somewhere." And one day we were kind of chatting about it, and she's like, "Well, why are you doing this? Like, sometimes you come home and you don't feel good." And it's like, "Yeah, I'm tired after these treatments and that sort of thing." And it's like, well, because there's only a handful of folks that can take this medicine. So we've got to, give them some data points to be able to do the research to, make it better. If I'm not doing it and my family's not doing it, then they're not going to have as many people to get those data points right. So I think things like that are really important.
Does she understand?
I would say she has an understanding of it, not completely, right? There's the science behind it, not so much, but she understands that there are certain things daddy can't do anymore. Most of my progression has been in my lower right leg, so I have a pretty significant limp now. And she understands that sometimes daddy's going to be tired and he's not going to have the energy level to go and do like he used to, right? And she understands that it's a nerve disease and it's causing my nerves to die. So enough, I think. But also, as most parents, I imagine, would try to hide a little bit of it from her. I don't know that that's maybe necessarily the right thing to do, but one of the things I struggle with the most is feeling like I'm kind of cheating her out of some of her childhood because I can't, do some things that I used to. But yeah, I mean, I think she has an understanding of it, and especially on the weeks after the treatments when I am a lot more tired than my normal level of fatigue, she's very helpful, and which also makes you feel like you're cheating your child a little bit. I need an 8-year-old's help. Like, hey, do you mind going and getting daddy some water because he's got a headache and don't want to get out of bed? Things like that. But yeah, so.
Well, I will say from a child's standpoint, which I'm not a child anymore, but from a child's standpoint, I don't think you should feel like you're cheating her if she's got to help you. Because, like I said, I would do it all in a heartbeat again if I could. Yeah. So it's easier said than done, but I'm sure she will look back one day and think the same thing. Like, I would go get him that water and Tylenol for his headache again if I could. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's my mother also had ALS and she passed about 3 months before my daughter was born. And that's one of the things, like, it weighs on me all the time is what I'd give to let those two hang out together,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that.
What do you wish people understood more about ALS?
Well, I wish people understood the harsh reality of it, honestly, the brutality of it, especially since there is no cure. But I also, on the flip side, wish that more people understood that my personal opinion, I don't believe ALS is incurable. I just feel like it's underfunded.
Yeah.
And so the more that people talk about it, the more awareness there is, that's going to lead to more research. And then more research, we're eventually going to get there. It's going to take time, but the more we speak about it and the more the word gets out there, the better chances we have of finding a cure for it. So yeah,
Agreed.
it's not incurable. We'll get there.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that a little bit on the last one. I had two of my cousins who were diagnosed shortly after I was on, and we were talking about that, how, 20 years ago, cancer was kind of in the same boat. And now seems like there's a cancer clinic in just about every city.
Yeah, that's true.
Being that you're so public about advocacy, sharing your stories, things like that, what made you decide to do that?
Well, initially I started because I was already sharing my journey trying to conceive online, especially after 2 miscarriages. That was another spot that I feel like is isolating and isn't talked about enough. So I was already doing that. And in the moment, I couldn't just keep on posting videos because I had stopped trying to conceive while this was
Right.
going on in genetic testing. So while my dad was still alive, I would make videos about, I'm going to go home and take care of my dad for a little bit. I won't be posting for a while, but I never really shared he had ALS because to me, while he was still alive, that was his story to tell, and I didn't want to tell it for him. But since he passed, I feel like ALS has become a huge part of my life now. And if I'm going to be open and honest online about my journey, ALS is right at the top of the list. So that's why I'm public about it.
Yeah. Excuse me. Are they monitoring like NFL levels with you and things like that, or was it just the genetic test and that's kind of where it stopped?
So I did the genetic testing and the counseling, and then I saw my neurologist and did all the baseline tests, respiratory, occupational, physical, all kinds of stuff. And as far as my neurologist goes, it's just a once a year visit until symptoms appear, essentially. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing clinical trial. I'll start that next month, actually. And that'll be the nerve testing, spinal taps, stuff like that. And then I also I don't know if you're familiar with ALS TDI.
Mm-hmm.
So I do their ARC study where I survey speech stuff, in-home blood draws every 6 months, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as far as going to a clinic and being tested regularly, no, it's just once a year.
Okay. With the trial that you're doing, you said they're doing spinal taps.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we get the Qalsody injections. I would highly recommend staying very hydrated before, during, and after those.
Oh, thank you.
It seems to really help with the headaches. They can be also, if they have to, a smaller needle size for the fluid draw helps as well.
I asked the nurse who I've been talking to on the phone, is this going to be painful? And she was like, no, we'll numb the site. And she said, sometimes people get headaches, but other than that, you should be fine. You're going to be lying flat for about an hour while I talk to you anyways. You should be good to go.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned staying hydrated because I would definitely do that.
Definitely don't do what I did. And after my first Qalsody shot, I was like, I feel pretty good. I'm going to go meet up with a buddy today. And then by the time I got home, it felt like someone who stabbed me in the eye with an ice pick.
Oh, no.
Yeah. What gives you hope?
Ooh, hope for a cure, really.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I don't have hope for myself. That's dark. But like I said, I'm not banking on a cure in my lifetime. I'm hopeful, but I'm not counting on it.
Right.
So hope that maybe there will be, and maybe my children, if we get to have any, will be older when I eventually die. So my dad died at 58. I was 28, turning 29 like a week later. And then when his mom died, he was around 30. So I'm hoping my kids will be older than 30-ish, but I guess that's my hope. is that
Yeah.
my children will at least have me there for a longer period of time. And even if there's not a cure in my lifetime, maybe there will be a treatment for
Right.
seeing, you never know.
Yeah. It's funny. Our journeys are very similar to each other. My mother was also 50 when she passed, and I was 30. In a few months before my daughter was born. So that's wild.
It is. I've heard a lot. Now, I don't know which variant you have.
SOD1.
Okay. But I've heard a lot of people mention 58 as like the age, the median age that people are dying from, at least C9. I don't know about SOD1, but I'm like, man, because that's, my granny was 60, my dad was 58. So that's true for them at least. Never know.
Yeah. Where did they typically start seeing issues?
They were the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my granny's was in her legs. This is what I've been told. I don't remember it, but
Right.
I think she was tripping on stuff like rugs, and then her legs got weak, and eventually, she battled with it for 4 years. So eventually she was completely bedridden, couldn't do anything for herself. My dad started with a speech. We thought, which he didn't drink anymore, but he called me one day. He was a truck driver, and he called me and he was like, does my voice sound funny? I was like, yeah, it kind of sounds like you're drunk, like you're slurring your speech. And his first sentence after that was, I hope I don't have ALS. That's when I was like,
God.
you can't, like, hush. So his started in his speech, and then that was probably in the fall-ish of 2024. And it really just slowly progressed, slowly but kind of quickly, I guess you could say, with his speech. And then in March, found the tumor on his liver. And at that point, he could talk, but he was very nasally. So you couldn't really understand him unless you, like me or my mom, could understand him because we were there with him all the time. But got to the nasal point, and then with the ALS plus the cancer, he couldn't eat. So in May, he got the feeding tube. And then in June, he passed away. It was very quick.
Yeah.
But I will say his biggest fear once he said, I hope I don't have ALS, is that he would have ALS because he watched his mother go through it, how awful it was for her. And that was his biggest fear. So although I wish he was still here, I'm glad that it happened quickly so he didn't have to develop all of those symptoms because he was fearful of that.
Yeah, it's watching folks in my family go through it. Those last couple years are really rough. That last 8-9 months are brutal.
Mm-hmm.
What or who kind of inspires you to keep doing what you're doing? Besides, the hope for a cure, things like that.
Yeah. The stories that I see on TikTok, honestly, I've connected with a lot of people in the ALS community. And there are people, obviously I haven't been diagnosed yet. I'm just pre-symptomatic, but there are people who you would think would be having the worst time of their life. They are wheelchair bound, they have trachs, and they are still so positive. They probably aren't positive all the time in their day-to-day life, but they show that it is possible to still be happy with a terminal disease. You're still a human. This is still your life. I think a big misconception that people have maybe towards ALS is that, or any disability really in general, when you see someone who can't talk and they can't move, you kind of assume they may have some sort of mental issue as well.
Right.
No, these people are fully there in their minds. They are aware. And so, yeah, I think it's seeing how they present themselves to the world is super inspiring because, like I said, these people that you would think would have just given up by now, and they don't.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I was one of the ladies I follow on Instagram who has ALS. I was watching her the other day, and she's hang gliding.
Oh wow!
They strap her into a hang glider, and she go around and land. And I'm like, that's
awesome.
Couldn't do that. I don't think I'd ever be a hang glider, but the fact that she is like, that's, like you said, it's very inspiring watching people still go through their lives.
Yeah.
Not almost like nothing's wrong sometimes.
You still have dreams, even though you may not be able to do everything you want. You still have dreams to live out.
Absolutely.
And if you've got the chance, do it.
What would be a piece of advice you would give someone who's thinking about going through genetic testing or genetic counseling?
Well, I'm all for everyone being able to make that choice for themselves, but I think it was a good thing for me anyways. I know there are people who are very against it. I am glad I did it, but I would say don't do what I did and just go get the test done. Make sure you have counseling beforehand and afterwards so that you are aware, because there can be legal ramifications as far as insurance and all kinds of stuff. So luckily I had everything already where I wanted it, essentially, because I was kind of aware that if my grandmother and my dad had it, I was probably going to get it as well. So I had everything taken care of, but I definitely would suggest that if you're thinking about getting genetic testing, please go to a genetic counselor prior to and weigh out all the pros and the cons, and then make your decision.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have one of my cousins kind of talk to me a little bit about it beforehand and kind of give me very similar advice, like get some of your affairs in order before, because there could be some insurance ramifications for sure once you get that test back. So
yeah. Can I ask, sorry, okay. I was going to ask, how many people in your family have been affected?
So the number we'd always heard as kids was into the 30s. I've been working with the genetic counselor at the clinic that I go to. We've confirmed 25 cases, and there may be some other branches of the family that play into that 30-ish number. I was told I was number 36, but it doesn't seem like that may be the case now. We're working to kind of iron that out. My great-grandfather was the first person specifically diagnosed with ALS. Like, that was the cause of death on his death certificate. He had a brother and sister that were trying to track down that side as well.
Now, was it all ALS or was some of it FTD? Do you know?
As far as I know, everyone's ALS SOD1 gene. Now, some of those folks early on weren't genetically tested, but being, I've got an aunt, an uncle, 6 cousins that are currently on Qalsody. All of us have SOD1.
Wow. Okay, another question. Yeah. Sorry. I'm curious about ALS in general, and I don't know much about anything other than C9, because that's all I've just head first into C9. Do you feel like the Qalsody works?
So I had my 1-year checkup after getting on Qalsody this past February. My NFL levels have dropped back into normal ranges. My neurologist seems to think, so I have trouble flexing my foot down like you're pressing the gas pedal. And I have trouble flexing it in like you're standing pigeon-toed.
Yeah.
The downward flexion doesn't seem to have changed much. The inward flexing of my foot, he believes, has gotten stronger. We haven't done any EMG testing or anything like that afterwards since I've been on Qalsody, so there's no data points to prove it. But I definitely haven't gotten worse, so that's something, right? I could live here for a while.
Yeah.
I have another cousin, or one of the cousins that was on with me last week. He's able to flex his toes again. They were fairly paralyzed. He can move his foot, but was having issues flexing toes. So we've seen some good results in my family. I think there are 6 of us that are currently taking it. One of our cousins was in the trials for tofersen when it first got kicked off. So, and he's, if I'm not mistaken, 7 years he's been taking it now. So, and I mean, other than if you saw him and you knew him, you kind of know that something was going on. But if you didn't know, you just think he's moving a little slower than normal.
Wow. That's awesome though.
It is that I would say that's the thing that gives me the most hope, especially after getting tested, knowing I have it, getting on the medicine, having a daughter that I have a chance to pass it down to, knowing that, there's a treatment out there that appears to be helping a lot of people. It's also double-edged sword. It's one of the things that I feel the most guilty about when I talk to other folks with ALS. There's my family's progression usually starts in lower extremities, feet, legs, that sort of thing. So our progression timeline's a lot longer. And then, to have the right version of ALS that has a treatment out there is something I, battle with sometimes.
Well, I will say though, as a C9 carrier, that gives people like me hope that, years ago, this wasn't even an option for you guys. So
yeah,
the fact that they're starting to roll out things, even for just SOD1 right now, I mean, that gives C9 people hope that theirs is on the horizon as well.
Yeah, everyone I've ever talked to about it's always said the same thing. Like, "Oh, this is great. This is great." And it's like, yeah, it is great. And I love that it's here. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the reasons I'm, doing things like this is because I do feel a bit of a responsibility to help folks that aren't in my situation,
Yeah. Well, that's good though. I'm glad that it's helping at least to some degree with your family.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? I feel like I've asked a bunch of them. Do you have any?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think that covers all the topics I had. I want to thank everybody for watching. Those of you who are, do the liking, sharing, subscribing, all that kind of good stuff. I want to thank the ALS Association for putting this on and letting me do it. Thank you, Lee, for being here. Any closing thoughts?
No, I'm glad you're doing this. I watched the first two and it's very interesting. I hate that it's interesting. I mean, I'd rather you guys not be going through this, but
so would we.
I'm glad that you are because it's going to bring a lot of awareness to it. So thank you.
That is the hope.